Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program on the planet giving you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. How do we do that? Well, we take what's happening in the world around us, top news stories, and we unfold them. We try to dig down into the core of them and the spiritual principles that are playing out in the events happening around us. IKYA reminds us all the time that life is spirituality and spirituality is life. So here at IKYA Live, we don't report the news, we rather unfold the news. And we hope that in doing that, we help you and other spiritual seekers out there to kind of get closer to the world around you and to see the world around you as your spiritual laboratory, as your playground. There's nothing to be afraid of in the events happening in the world around us. Rather, it's all about kind of unpacking and discovering what's really going on and how everything happening is spiritual growth in action. So remember to, down below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, ikya.official. And even right now, go ahead and share tonight's episode with anyone and everyone that you think might benefit or be interested, because they can still join live by just clicking on the link. So please share the episode now, and also share it onto your social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and we're also there at ikya.official, so be sure to like us there. And again, tonight is really a conversation. IKYA Live is never a news report, and it depends on us asking questions and actually, questioning and exploring what's happening and how IKYA is presenting it, because we want to get deeper. And so really don't hesitate. Whatever questions that you have, there is no stupid question. If you've got a quote-unquote stupid question, other people do too, and IKYA is happy to dig into it. So if you're online, please go ahead and write your questions or comments or perspectives in the chat below. And we've got a live studio audience here that has also got a microphone. They'll join in. Let's make tonight super engaging, because we have that, what can we call him, jackball of Donald Trump back in the news. I'm so tired of talking about him, but we have to, because as one kind of soul incarnated on this planet, that guy is, tearing us a new butthole, to put it that way. But he's ripping apart our politics, he's ripping apart our financial systems, economics. He's turning everything on its head. It's really amazing what that one person is able to do. And so tonight we're going to address, what is it in human psychology and in our spiritual unfoldment that, someone like Donald Trump can capture our imagination and encourage us to look past reality and anything that he says or does. We just, explain it away and we continue to support him. What the F, what is going on? So I'm going to turn it right over to IKYA with exactly that. Donald Trump, IKYA, WTF.
And
Can you start over, please?
sure.
Thank you.
Now, Trump is the most famous person in human history. And he's the #1 mascot of our civilization. And why is that? He then mirrors the very core of who we are as humans. Which is interesting. Humans are not good people, right? And we should not trick ourselves into believing that we're good people, because we're not. Humans are terrible. And he just reflects that. He is the essence of our civilization. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that whenever one plays by the rules, it's normal for someone to feel kind of shame and guilt when they're not. He has none of that, which means he's then free to do whatever he wants to. And the rules and the laws are not made for someone who pretend that they don't exist, right? And he gets away with it. It's fascinating how, like, if anybody else did like less than 1% of what he done, they'd be in prison for life. And he keeps just, rolling on. And to me, when we look at the news and look at what's happening in the world, as spiritual, seekers and spiritual travelers, I think it's important that we try to mirror ourselves in what's going on. Is that, well, this is part of the space, it's part of the collective consciousness, it's part of us. So how is this relevant to us, right? And that's where I think we should have this conversation. It's important whenever something happens and whenever someone does anything to not judge, right? But rather see it's an expression of karma, it's an expression of consciousness. And obviously a lot of people, they have the same consciousness and karma since it becomes such a big thing. And we need to look at what does that mirror in us? How is this relevant for our process? And I hope you all can ask questions and be active, because to me this is really interesting. Now, one thing that's quite clear, when you look at the question, why on earth? When he's committed tens of crimes in broad daylight, and he is indicted, there are all these trials going on, and people still support him, and changes nothing. How is that possible? And the reason is because reality does not matter to anyone. Reality and truth has never mattered to anyone, ever. And this is part of what he is mirroring and questioning. And he's showing very clearly that humans don't care about reality. We think we do, but we don't. Reality does not relate to the survival of an individual. So, like, when it comes to personal interest, it's whatever can help you survive. And your brain will stitch together the information you need in order to navigate, and that will be your map, that will be your beliefs, that will be your assumptions, and that will be a successful strategy. Reality and truth has got nothing to do with it at all. And it's difficult for us as humans to fully understand this. And even for you, as a spiritual seeker, it might be difficult because, I'm seeking truth. Well, are you sure? Are you sure that you don't want your beliefs to be confirmed? Right? And we need to use Trump as a mirror for that process. Now, as I said, like, when it comes to survival, reality does not play a part in it. It's relating to your environment, right? And that's wherever you are, whatever you are doing, whatever other people are doing, that's your sense of reality, and you will draw your conclusions based on that. And that will help you more than understanding physics in general, right? Or general principles. So, truth and reality only becomes relevant when you go past the level of the self, when you go past the individual. Most people don't. So, this is also part of the struggle as a spiritual student, right? The balance between the self and what comes after. Because the self has no interest in reality and truth. And once you start opening up to the level beyond the individual, you start realizing that, I'm just full of lies. I'm just full of beliefs. The ego is just full of itself. And that's a very kind of difficult process to go through, right? But we all are dealing with the limitations of our own ego, understanding that it makes a very local map based on our experiences and whatever works, right? And people do that. So do not for a minute think that reality or what is true matters to anyone. Think of also part of the kind of tribalization of people today is actually a correction based on what's natural for humans. Because we've always lived in small groups. And we create the we based on our group and how we build identity and how we then care for the ones in our group and how to identify as this particular group and how we then stand out when it comes to other groups that we of course hate, right? We have to protect ourselves, we have to fight them because. So it's all based on identity markers and creating the sense of we. And what we've done today with globalization, it's completely, humans have not been able to include and understand the tribalistic psychology of humans, right? It's one thing to have the ideal that, oh yeah, we should all be friends, we should all be one. But humans are not hardwired that way. That happens when you grow beyond the self, and most people have not. So what happens when we're supposed to care about everyone, like everyone, everyone's equal, all of that, it has the opposite effect because it's a tribal individual not recognizing their tribe. And then in that type of environment, you run around and kind of look for your people, and you will find them. And when you do, the first order of business is identity. Who are we? What do we stand for? And what is necessary when we are in this sea of everybody? We need to figure out what makes us different. And that will draw you into the more extreme points of view, because then you can decide, like, this is what we think, this is what we believe, right? And the more you are exposed to everyone, and we're all supposed to be in the same team and all of that, the more you will be drawn into what will make you stand out, because you are hardwired, right, to operate that way. There's nothing wrong with it. It's your biology. It's part of the self. So the kind of tribalization of our civilization, it is because of the whole globalization thing having gone too fast for people to adapt it. We don't care about everyone. We only care about the ones who can help us survive. And we identify that by thinking the same way, behaving the same way, and believing the same things. Now, when you want to interact with people, it's important that we have the same maps, right? If you're on a team of like people who pick berries, it's important that the other people also have maps where you can pick berries are highlighted. Where you can fish is not relevant if you pick berries. It's that simple. So genetically, we're hardwired to seek out the people with the same type of maps. It's got nothing to do with reality. And as I said, part of it is creating beliefs and establishing beliefs that simply tells the story that this is who we are. And often, the further away it is from collective accepted ways of thinking, the more we can say that we're special. Think of the alternative movement. You know, the same thing. There's a lot of that going on. And the weirder it is, right, the stranger the belief systems, the more people can feel that we're special, right? We have a divine connection. We have seen truth and other people have not. It's the same thing. And I think it's important to also recognize that, you know, as I've said many times, people in modern spirituality are often extremely gullible, willing to believe anything. Religious people, by default, believe anything because a part of their practices is to believe without evidence and treat that as a fact. So they are willing to just take something they feel and establish that as a fact. We are like this. So, also in a world where it's more difficult to navigate, and think of today, we're exposed to more and more information. And when we go back in history, when we lived in small tribes, even then people felt that there was too much information. So let's get someone who really gets it so I can just do my thing. Now, how this developed, I often go back to evolution and human history because it's such a great tool to understand how we actually operate. Now, this whole thing with belief and trust and not caring about reality, it started the moment humans began to specialize. When you specialize, when you're in a group, and you figure out, oh, right, if you do that and I do that and this person will do that, we'll do better than if we all try to do the same thing at the same time. And from that moment on, trust came into the picture. Because if you have someone being the hunter, you need to trust that person will bring food to the tribe. If someone is a warrior, you need to trust that individual to be able to protect the tribe. So we began developing trust as a concept. And with that came belief. Because belief is simply what you imagine someone you trust, what they would be doing to deliver on your trust. It's basically the tribe has a hunter, and the belief is that this hunter is now the one who will be gathering food or hunting, and with the expectation of this hunter delivering on that belief. This is religion. And with that comes expectation. So humans developed this pattern of outsourcing so we could then focus on what we were doing. And from that moment on, humans stopped caring about everything. And it's interesting that from that moment on, humans became less intelligent. Because when we have to do everything and be responsible for our own survival completely, we have to map out everything, we have to do everything, we need to understand everything. With specialization, I say, well, I will just do this, and I will do this very well, and I'll get better and better, and I don't care about the rest. That's someone else's job. So then you need someone on top being responsible for the overarching belief, the overarching map, right? So that everyone functioning within that map then will, fulfill their expectations. Humans were very successful at this strategy, and it became part of our DNA. So, with the world being extremely complex, and we are hardwired to specialize, we want someone else to take the responsibility. We want someone else to tell us what reality is because we can't deal with it. It's too much. Which means we want to specialize even more. I just want to focus on this. So we become even more self-centered and less interested in the world. And this is also what we're seeing. People are getting less interested in what's happening everywhere else, and they focus more on what's relevant to themselves, their feelings, their lives, and they don't care about anything else. And this is why when we have, figures who can come tell it like the way it is, it's just a feeling, right? This person I can trust. Because you need someone forceful, someone you can understand, and someone who will trigger your feelings. Because when it comes to trust, it's just a feeling. they have not yet necessarily delivered. And the reason also why this is happening with a person like Trump is his base feel that they've been let down by the system. And in their religious brains, they trusted the system. And then they figure out that the system is their enemy, right? They can see life around them falling apart. And they feel like the system is not delivering based on their trust. And the system demanding their trust. So that gets broken. And then it's easier to trust someone who has not failed on their trust or like delivering what they want. And one thing that's really important to understand is because we've become more and more self-centered. The fact that, you know, he stole a lot of classified document and basically laid it out for any kind of spy to drop by and have a look, nobody cares. It's not relevant to how they feel in their own lives. They don't care about him kind of pulling out international agreements because, you know, it doesn't affect their personal lives, so they don't care. And this is why a lot of the things that he's accused of doing is not seen as him breaking the trust or the expectation. It's actually seen as him reinforcing it. Because the identity is, he is fighting the system, right? So the more indictment he gets, the more he fights, and that strengthens the identity of him representing his base, who also feel that they're fighting the system, but they're losing. They can't do anything. So they're rooting for him. So the more crimes he commit, the more powerful the faith from his base become. And it's completely logical. It's completely natural. But this is also why you cannot convince them with facts. And they can just make up the story. They just made all of it up. Because they have no trust in the system. And they connect to this one individual representing their feelings. And again, he has not broken the trust and what he has delivered based on their feelings. So all the laws he has broken, they're not relevant to his base. If he had broken any of those expectations, it would be different. But for now, that has not happened. And this is why, again, it doesn't matter how many court cases, doesn't matter. As long as it does not break kind of the trust and the expectation. And also, he has been able to establish more of that religious relationship, which is what people seek. So it's completely understandable. Did we have any comments or questions? Yeah.
Yes, my colleague and I are sitting here thinking Trump's not alone, you know, and or maybe we're not the only ones, but we notice a pattern that leaders, both in politics and business, tend not to necessarily be the smartest or the most compassionate, empathetic, maybe more awakened consciousness or anything. But what I heard you say, it sounds to me like often the leaders need to be strong, they need to have conviction, and they need to trigger my feelings. That's basically it, right?
Yes. It's as though when you outsource your trust, and its leadership is about, in our DNA, we still live in small groups. We still live in tribes. So it's like, I do my thing and I feel that I'm doing my part. Because right, we all feel that way. It's always the other ones. They're the problems. They're not doing their part. So when you have the story, I'm doing my part, and the reason why my life sucks is because other people are not doing their part. You want someone who can share that way of thinking or those feelings, or at least communicate to you that you are right. It's the others, right? This is why, for instance, a person like Trump, and you've seen a lot of people in human history, they find someone to blame, or several groups they can blame, because they will represent the other people in the big tribe who are not doing what they're supposed to, and they're the reason. Is basically like, if the hunter is not doing his job, there is no food, and it's his fault. And it's that simple logic. So when we can point to someone, it's them. That will be the logical explanation for why my life sucks. This is why we're so easy to convince when it comes to that type of argument. And politicians have used it since we invented politicians, right? It's the most efficient political argument you can possibly come up with. And it's all he does, right? Making his base feel seen, because it's never them, it's always the others. The problem, as we know, when we look at history, is that when you have a leader like that, sooner or later, it's everyone, right? As long as you're on the right team, it's all the others. But at some point, there's nobody left. And we've seen that many times. But people today, they don't know anything about history, because, it's not instant gratification. People are becoming less and less informed as we have more and more information. Back to, like, let that be someone else's problem, Let me just look at cats and TikTok, whatever, because that is more gratifying. So we become more and more tribal, more and more specialized. And remember, our specialization is not just what we do professionally in a tribe. Our brain is wired to, we can just continue. So we can become specialized within a group of specialists, right? If you have a group of hunters, you will diversify within that group of hunters, and you will specialize within that specialization, and so on and so forth. So you can come up with the idea that, well, I'm highly specialized, and I'm very important, and you're really not doing anything, but you can create this idea that I'm very important, I have a very important function, as long as you're not being corrected. Because today you're not. You will just continue to kind of specialize, which means you will not care about anything. You will care about less and less and less and less, because you will be drawn to whatever will trigger your brain chemicals that will give you that instant gratification, telling you that you're doing the right thing now. So we're not contributing in any productive way, and yet we think we're very important. And the reason why our life sucks, of course, is because everyone else are not doing their job, right? This psychology it's very important that we understand it ourselves, because our civilization is in a place where we are all part of it. And it's so easy to be tricked by our own genetics and our own kind of brain functions. So we need to learn to be contributing more. We need to be applying more critical thinking and not think that we are right or that we understand. We'll get back to that in a while. Any more questions?
We have a queue of questions, so we'll go first to the studio audience.
Mm-hmm. So I have two questions. One, if we all are one, and this being Trump, or this being has incarnated as Donald Trump, how do we treat that with love? And I guess my second question is, in the United States especially, the polarization that's taken place over the last 7-8 years has torn a lot of people apart. The trust in this whole society is dropping quickly. And how is that, from a spiritual perspective, a good thing? How do we view that as a positive thing? Is it enhancing? Is it speeding up evolution? Is it contributing to something?
Well, why does it have to be a good thing?
Maybe it's not.
It's simply the result of the collective consciousness. Now, it's important to understand that Trump is a symptom. He's not the cause. He's just channeling it. He could not become what he's become if it was not needed in the collective consciousness to have a manifestation carrying that consciousness and that energy. So he's doing us all a favor by letting this flow to the surface instead of being kind of underground. Because when something is moving around in consciousness, at some point it needs a form. And humans are not better than this, right? And our Western civilization has been going in a very peculiar direction for the last decades. And everything that's happening now has been foreseen and has been discussed. And it's very interesting because when I, for instance, talked to leaders and politicians globally in the 80s about what's happening now, it was completely impossible for them to understand. So like, you know, and so we should prepare for this so we can like open different pathways. But no, because it's like, it's impossible, this can't be. So it, you know, people aren't like that. But it's playing out because it has to. Everything that's happening is the logical consequence of choices that were made, you know, after the Second World War. Even then, it was very easy to predict what's happening now. You just need to understand history. You need to understand human consciousness and genetics and evolution, and you know, so it's not difficult. But the polarization is necessary. And it happens because of this extreme tribalization. But if there's a silver lining, it is that this is happening as part of the preparation for what we often refer to as the new paradigm. There are many different concepts around this, but it's basically understanding that the planet is moving into a different vibration. There are more channels being opened, which means also humans will have to grow into a different consciousness. And all of this belongs to what we call the old paradigm, the old planet. And it's human history up till now has worked because it's been small scale, right? And we, as humans, we're proud to behave as if what we do, it's only us, right? We're not used to being this many people. So when, for instance, when you had like 500,000 people on the planet, you could pretty much do whatever. Just think of how people can just litter, right? Throw garbage around because, oh, it's just me. Doesn't matter. Like, people still think that way because we're not used to being this many people. So everything in human behavior is hardwired to exist in small scale life, small scale civilization. And we've kind of reached the end of what the planet can take with the current type of human. So there are some tweaks going on, and as I've explained, there are more and more individuals from other planets incarnating on this planet into humans, and that is fucking everything up in a fun way, because it also means that there are a lot of individuals incarnating with specialization, but also in consciousness, understanding how to lift, how to pull human civilization in a different direction. And whenever there is an expansion of consciousness, what happens then? When you look at your own life, whenever there is an expansion, that does not mean that all of a sudden you feel more love. Your life works, you know, that everybody's happy. The opposite is happening, right? It's like when you have more light, you see the dirt more clearly. That's the only difference. So expansion of consciousness does not mean that you have worked out your karma. It means that you better work out your karma, bitch. Right? So the distance between those two levels of vibration will then manifest, because that will be the tension. This is the resistance that it will be existing in, is your current level and the next. And then when you are in that resistance, that will manifest. That's what will become matter, and things you can interact with. So what's going on in the planet and why it's intensifying is simply because one has opened the consciousness a little bit and expanded just a tad, which means the resistance increases. The karma will intensify. And then all of these different processes will happen as a result, because it doesn't mean when a space expands that you all of a sudden have a higher consciousness or that you become more intelligent. It's the opposite. So you become aware of your own kind of dysfunctionality, your own lack of intelligence, your own lack of consciousness, and the consequences of your lack. And then you have to figure it out. This is why our evolution is stepwise. You have to take one step at a time, because otherwise you would just implode. Right? So when the space in your space is just opened a little bit, you feel like everything is happening at once and everybody's out to get you. And you lose everything, like things will happen, right? So it's just that. And when we are exposed to expansion, which means we have to expand and accept more and include more, the self will try to do the opposite. Right? When we are in resistance, we will pull back, which means that we will have more like orthodox ways of thinking. People are flooding through, for instance, Islam, which is at this point the best religion for that, because they're extremely conservative, very strict. They have rules for everything. That makes you feel safe. And also politically, you get this sense of I have lost. It's the other people's fault. So we polarize and we need the enemy. Like all of that, everything becomes black and white. I've talked about this. When we are exposed to more complexity, our brains will become more binary. Right? So binary simply means two, black and white, right, wrong, because that's what we can deal with. When we have an increased level of stress, just like when you are afraid, it will be life and death, friend and enemy. It's, my way or you're an enemy, right? It's natural. So we become more black and white. And of course, because we all of us belong to the right team. God always agrees with us. It's the others. They're the devil. Right? Because that's the logical conclusion. If God agrees with us, those are evil and they should be punished. And it so happens that God appointed me to punish you. Like, it's that way of thinking. It's so easy to go there. So expansion, when you're not ready, will cause a binary, in a way, kind of setback. You will become more binary in the way you think, feel, and behave, and the stories you make. And you will justify it. You will think you see things very clearly, because once you remove complexity and everything is black and white, you see very clearly, right? And when you've decided what's your team, what's white and what's black is extremely clear. And you don't have to think anymore, right? And that's how you get through crisis. From an evolutionary point of view, you're supposed to do that, because then evolution will show who was right. Not from a truth perspective, simply about who survived. So it's in our DNA to behave this way. So what we can then see very clearly is that what is happening on this planet is the result of expansion. We would not have this reaction if expansion had not happened, which means, again, the space has been opened and now the negotiation is happening, and that will be happening in humans for, the next couple of centuries. And it will be violent. It will be very challenging, because then humans will have to work out their karma in a shorter period of time and go through basically accelerated evolution. Right? Because now we have to figure things out. We can't just continue the same way. So there is simply nothing that can stay the same. No culture can stay the same. No behavior can stay the same. And it will be very difficult. And this is why it's happening. And this is also why Trump represents the essence of ignorance, the essence of ego, the essence of kind of narcissism, and the essence of how our civilization has behaved. Right? He is our civilization's spirit animal. Right? And we need to look at that and look at that in ourselves. Also, how are we behaving the same way? Because that is what we then need to change in order also to bring the planet forward. And again, so when you look at modern spirituality and the alternative movement, there are a lot of exactly the same thing. Exact same behavior, the same level of being completely, disconnected from reality. Just making up whatever you want to be true and then insisting on it. And being dysfunctional, not contributing to the world in a productive way. Just sitting there and feeling that you're channeling so much you're contributing. No, you're not. You're delusional and you're narcissistic. What we learn when we are in service is that, yeah, it's one thing to channel, but you're also the one having to turn that into manifestation. You're not just an empty vehicle. You're the vehicle, but also the distribution system. You are the one manifesting. You are the one managing the manifestations. You are responsible for every single step and also transferring that and creating growth in the world around you, and then be part of evaluating, did this actually work, and then making changes and becoming better as a channel and vehicle. So no, just sitting there believing that you're spiritual is not lifting the planet. So it's all of that, right? Any more comments or questions?
We've got quite the queue, so bear
Good.
with me as I need to weave some comments from online in. And it's another perspective. Maria, she started by asking us whether we are mistaking Trump for Biden, because there's mountains of evidence that Biden and other Democrats are actually, they're the ones who are the criminals and doing things so wrong. And then Patrick chimed in that many of the Democrats and the media have been champions of war and conflict and are the ones who have been painting Trump as so evil. And then Fritjof asks, is Trump really more corrupt or criminal than any other politician or businessman, or is he just less good at disguising it? And I think that one is the question that kind of wraps up that other perspective. So I'll turn it over to you.
Now, again, as I've talked about before, we let the ones who represent us the most float to the top because they're supposed to represent us. So of course they're all corrupt. What do you think? Humans are corrupt. Humans are horrible. We are corrupt, self-serving, and willing to do absolutely anything as long as it will gain us. So the ones who win the Olympic championship in that will be the best ones, right? As we always let the best one float to the top. And we can't expect that the ones on top represent something else than who we are. They're also specialized. So yes, of course, they're all corrupt. The system is corrupt because people are corrupt by nature. We don't care about anything but our own gains. We're self-serving, narcissistic, aggressive, backstabbing, stealing, lying, individuals. We're not advanced. This is why spiritual work is so difficult. So of course, they're all criminals, sure. My point is that Trump is the most famous person in human history. And there's a reason for that. Because he mirrors this in such a direct way. But do not believe that anyone on top do not have a criminal mindset. Because humans have a criminal mindset. It's always about how can we, just do this and that, because it's about survival. And remember, laws are there to stop us from doing harmful things. And how many laws do we have? Because humans cannot stop figuring ways to harm each other. It's just, you know, it's just how it is. So don't think that none of them are good. No, they're not. But in the case of Trump, I think it is just a wonderful mirror. And he is helping bringing a lot of these conflicts to the surface, right? Because it's quite blunt. He's not sophisticated, which means also people can recognize themselves. He's committing crimes in broad daylight, right? We can all see it, and he still gets away with it. So when it comes to both corruption and crime and all of that, it's, you know, it's on both sides of the aisle and then some, right? So it's not about that at all. Now, and the last question was, can you just repeat that?
It was, is he really more corrupt or criminal than others, or just better at disguising it?
Exactly. No, I think, again, his directness and his inability to keep his mouth shut helps. Because I think it's also like popping a zit. I think because in our civilization, we've been pretending that we're good. Look at how we've been behaving in the West. Enslaving the rest of the world, exploiting them, going to war for oil, supporting dictators and doing this and that. You know, we're not good. Pretending that we're good because we don't show it to our own people. So we can pretend that we're good while we're supporting the worst in other places so we can have a good life and create the story that we're good people, right? So because the world is changing, meaning that the West will not be the definition of human civilization anymore. That is changing. So because the West will not fall apart, but it will not be the only narrative. It needs to be corrected. And as part of that, more of what we're actually doing, who we actually are, will have to surface. So we will need to look at ourselves and say, wow, maybe this is not so good. And then the rest of the world will see, exactly, we've been trying to tell you, but then you just like killed us all and corrupted us, you know? So it's part of bringing more balance to the world and having more narratives and not letting us get away with everything. We have created this enormous illusion in the West that we're good people. And we're not. And this is also the great potential in this shift for us individual, because this is an individual process, that we need to look at ourselves as humans, especially when we're involved with spiritual work, and see that, yeah, we may have some of these characteristics. And this is an excellent time to heal. And because of that, it's important to love the mirrors. It's important to love what's going on, right? It's simply bring things to the surface, right? The karma, the journey of the individual incarnating as Trump, it belongs to him. The same thing with other, people in the public eye. It's still their journey, and we invest ourselves in their journeys because they represent us just like Greek gods, right? These are modern Greek gods or Indian gods in the way that we have a whole, group of individuals with different characteristics that together kind of mirror the complete soul of our civilization. We pick and choose and we identify a little bit with that one and that one, and we hate that one, right? But it's still us. So it's important to love, because by loving all these individuals, we also love ourselves. And then we get access to healing those characteristics in ourselves, right? Again, back to, this is not about judging anyone. Try to, if you're in that mindset, try to let go of the judging thing, because this is just fascinating, right? We all incarnate because we have karma. We have different karma. And sometimes individuals have karma that more people can recognize themselves in, which means they will become more visible. But we all have a job to do when it comes to our own journey, but we need to love the process. We need to love everything that's going on, because it's simply life in expression. And everybody's here for the same reason. It's working out our own karma and becoming and moving closer to truth. No matter what we're doing, no matter where we're coming from, if we're famous or not famous, we're here for the same reason. But we can learn from each other and mirror, and also understand that we're kind of co-creating the spaces, right? And then we can also look at ourselves, how can I then be a better co-creator of this? How can I, when this space is here, how can I contribute in lifting the consciousness? And if we judge, we're certainly not part of healing. We're not part of lifting. We're making it worse. Right? So it's just so important that we can see everyone and see that we're all here to work out our own resistance. There's room for that. And we can learn from each other, and we can love and lift each other. Right? And that's what we should focus on. Okay?
We have a question from Sara in the audience.
Okay, the specialization thing, when you're talking about many, like 1,000 years ago in a village and they were like specializing, it's a lot more nowadays. So if that was a way to not be intelligent, then look at us now. So I was thinking, if we were like to work with being more creative and just working with being more solution-oriented, is it maybe a thing to expose yourself to new things or learn new things? How can we like not limit ourselves because we're all very specialized?
Yes. Now, when it comes to first, just looking at intelligence, when we specialize, it means that we become more intelligent in the field where we specialize. So it doesn't mean that we get dumber per se, but we get less intelligent in everything else because we're not feeding it, we're not studying, we're not learning. So, you know, just like I've met scientists in theoretical physics, and they can hardly like tie their own shoes, right? Because they're so highly specialized that they can't function as a normal human being. It's that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a natural effect of living in a civilization. And one of the challenges we meet is that as humans, life is too complex. It's too much. No one can possibly, as a human, have the full overview. It's impossible. It's too much. And that represents a great risk. And this is also why we will go through now a phase of kind of deglobalization, because humans feel that this is not me. I don't want this. I need to understand what I'm part of. We all feel the need to, oh, right, this is my life. This is where I live. These are the rules. This is how it works. So we'll go through a phase of kind of deglobalization till we have adjusted because it's too big, and no one today is able to fully understand anything. It's too much. So yes, it might be helpful to take a step back and now focus on kind of smaller kind of units again, and that will happen. But the process of connection and kind of globalization of consciousness, that will still move on. But there is a real challenge for humans today where the level of complexity has gone far beyond what humans are capable of, right? So even when we try to inform ourselves, it's difficult because back to reality not playing a part in our survival. And we have access to a lot of information, but we have a tendency to be drawn to the information that will trigger brain chemicals. And facts don't do that. So it is very difficult, and I think we need to challenge ourselves in different ways than we needed to do only like 20 years ago. And as I always say, the answer to every question is raise your consciousness. The way I explained it is very, very simple. If you think of your consciousness as a cone or round pyramid thing, right? The higher you go, the wider your footprint will be. So to have a better overview, you need to rise in consciousness first. And in spiritual work, this is the essence of what we all do in different ways, in trying to move to higher levels of consciousness, which means that we see things differently, we connect the dots differently, and we can see things which basically are impossible to see from the ground. So also looking at that and truly doing the spiritual work of lifting consciousness, because no matter how much information you have, you will not be able to assemble it correctly. It will just be a jungle. And it's impossible to navigate through a jungle from the ground. You need to look at it from above, then you can navigate. So, and also today, I think in spiritual work, so many people are drawn into this information jungle and lowering their consciousness by believing any of this being important. It's just individual working out their karma, right? And criticizing it, making up stories about it, judging it, is not raising your consciousness. It's pulling you down. It's when you raise your consciousness first and then you observe things, oh, right, that's why. And you increase your love and patience and compassion for whatever anyone has to go through, and you see it as absolutely necessary. Because when something happens, it's absolutely necessary. Right? Because it means it's a combination of consciousness and karma and point of evolution in individuals and groups and all of that. So when something happens, it's because it can't be any other way. And if you're in a process of awakening, you should know by default that when something happens, it's necessary. And therefore, you don't judge it. You can observe it, you can learn from it, you can be mirrored in it, but it's still none of your business. And it's neither negative or positive, it's just happening because that's the expression.
Audien in the Netherlands points out we've got 14 months of this campaign ahead of us, but a practical reality, if our global spirit animal, Donald Trump, gets re-elected, are we more likely to see civil war in the United States or geopolitical war or conflict across the planet?
There is so much conflict coming. Because when you go from this artificial kind of globalized space where we pretend all to be on the same team while we're really not, that will have to be corrected. People have to find themselves again, right? When we're supposed to be including everything and everybody's equal, humans are not ready for that yet. So they will withdraw, they will become more tribal, and then you have the whole process of, I'm different than you. And then you manifest that. And part of saying that I'm different is going to war. Because then you have enemies, because we're different. It's how we operate as humans. So there will be more conflict until that or those generations have died. Remember also that more advanced consciousness are incarnating in humans all the time, right? So it's a matter of also more advanced beings being human, and the old version will be kind of phased out. It will take a few centuries, right? But it's a process where basically more advanced souls are incarnating because now it's their turn to take over, right? So this will all be worked out. But in that meantime, yes, when people are confronted with themselves, they will always attack the mirror, just like a cat or dog will do. So that will happen. And it's not really a matter of Trump being elected or not, because it's still the same people, it's still the same consciousness, it's still the same karma, it's still the same country. Right? It's still where the collective consciousness is, and the consequences of that consciousness and that karma and how it's going to be worked out. It's not based on what mirror you look in. Sometimes it's just the frame of the mirror that will be different. So if you have, the typical Trump mirror, like gold everywhere, or if you have a mirror from IKEA, you look pretty much the same. Right? And that's something we often forget, is that we believe that the mirrors will change anything. This is wherever you go, there you are. You will be mirrored no matter where you go. Your level of consciousness and your karma evolution will not change based on your surroundings. So how humans will work their way through this phase is not really down to the leadership. It's down to people. It's down to different kind of groups of people. It's down to the individuals. And for your personal journey, this is why you incarnated here, because you needed those mirrors. And maybe that's because you're a little bit naive. I'm talking to all of you now about your own karma. Why else would you choose to live an adult life on this planet right now, where all of this is intensifying? Right? And what we're waking up to is how terrible we are as humans. I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. It's just like, look at us, right? So it's looking at the mirrors and taking that in and say, oh, wow, maybe I got some fine-tuning to do. Right? And then to do that, and do that with creativity and joy and being happy about being in the place that will now intensify how it mirrors you from all angles. Because when you seek truth, that's what you want. Right? You don't need a Photoshop filter. You just want to see the truth about yourself. And this is what we need to do as spiritual travelers on the planet right now. We need to look at ourselves, not say, oh, this is not mine, or it's all the others, because I'm meditating. We need to do the opposite. Right? We need to look and confront ourselves in all the different mirrors and try to relate to what we see. And friends, when we're being triggered, like if we judge something, it's because we have the same thing. Why else would we judge it? Why else would we say, oh, it's them? When we do that, we can be very sure that it's not. It's in us, right? So it's also learning to confront ourselves more directly. And then learn what to do with it, how to heal more quickly, right? How to cleanse it out more quickly, how to translate and transform our own behavior into a more enlightened version. Well, this is what we can do. So I think what's happening on this planet is absolutely magnificent. It's the best thing ever. This planet has never been more exciting than right now, but we need to use it. Because if you want truth, there have never been more mirrors. Because the mirrors will show you the lies. It will not show you truth. Because truth is only what happens when you remove the lies. You need to see your own resistance. You need to see the differences. You need to see the impurities. So this is happening with the mirrors that are all around now. Right? So if you see the impurities in the world, it's because you see it in yourself. Right? So we need to take that responsibility and use it, and then it's just fun. Any more questions?
Yes, we've got a question from Maria in the audience.
Yeah, I just like reflecting on, the specialization thing. Because in one way, I experienced that if you look upon the collective consciousness on the planet, it's almost like it's assisting into dissolve some of the solidity by everyone being more and more specialized, and through that disconnected more from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, at least, I experienced that also might also force people to also go more into a consciousness that are beyond as well, that it has two sides in it, because everything kind of dissolves around. And as you said, also the mirror gets more like diverse, that you get a lot of different types of mirror. That's a part of the real gift, that you can really get specialized mirror from a lot of different angles. But at the same time, I experienced that also kind of gives space for more of the consciousness of oneness and love and vertical can also then also come forth.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that the only reason anything happens is to promote healing and growth and thereby more love. So that is truly what's happening. This is also what you can feel like the bigger collective consciousness. Remember that as soul or atma or whatever you want to call it, you differentiate between what you are and what you're studying. You recognize that your karma is what you are kind of working out on what you're studying. It's not you. So you don't identify with it. That's why you need to incarnate to identify with it. So in like spiritually, that consciousness is observing it, and everything is happening kind of within that body of consciousness. And at that level, everybody incarnating here is fully aware that it's simply a healing process. Our growth, our complete journey spiritually is a healing process. It's only opening us up for more love and truth. So that is also important to remember. So we don't look too much on the manifestations and we believe them, because then we start judging and then we make up stories. When we can see that, yes, this is happening because as souls, as Atma, this is what we want. We want to move to the next level. And then this is what we need to do to work it out. So we're both in that, spiritual consciousness kind of outside our incarnations, taking part in that. And you can feel it almost like a buffer. Like it's this very kind of soft buffer for this planet. And then everything's happening within that. So it starts with kind of a loving, almost like a comforter around the planet, and within, everybody just like works it out and assists each other. Because also remember, when it comes to how we work out our karma, often the people we attack are the ones we love the most. Because we go into different discussions and different positions based on a spiritual understanding of how to achieve certain goals, certain forms of growth. And often it's, okay, if I stand there and you stand there, that dynamic will happen. Ooh, we can work out a lot of karma there. So from a spiritual perspective, it's very different, right? It's from the human perspective that we behave as humans. We are not humans higher up. So absolutely, it's very, when we connect to that level, we can feel that first there is love, first there's the connection with expansion, and then it's simply everybody looking at themselves and everybody else as an organism, and then whatever we need to adjust, that will happen, and everybody is helping each other. No matter what happens, that's what is necessary to achieve growth, right? No matter what it is, it can look absolutely horrific. Well, then that's the path. That's the healing path necessary. So yes, it's a very important perspective to remember.
Speaking of looking horrific, Florian asks a really interesting question. Are there any biological disease processes that mirror something similar to this evolution of Trump?
Yes. They will come. I will not say more about that yet, but just like with COVID, there will be more waves. And what they do is heal the collective consciousness and the global consciousness. Because that's also yet another way to create balance and to find solutions together. And it's interesting, when it comes to health, humans have a tendency to be able to put aside other differences. Because when it comes to like survival, enemies can work together. So with the deglobalization, part of it is we need to still work together and find global solutions for everything. When it comes to the environment, when it comes to our health. So that will continue. And of course there will be waves of illnesses that will require global cooperation. It's also just part of the human journey, but it's necessary and it's healing.
We have a question from Lena in the audience.
Yes. First of all, thank you for reminding us that this is a part of all of our karma. But when it comes to meeting people in our daily lives that have, for example, the conspiracy theories, it's first of all not judging and like supporting them somehow, and I guess it's different ways of being to each person. But is it something like you can say about how to relate to it? Because I sometimes I don't know what to say. Should I say anything? Should I just join them or whatever?
Sure. Yeah. I've talked quite a lot about conspiracy theories and why we're drawn to them, right? So I will not talk any more about that. But if we can just understand that the brain will make a map based on the information it has, and what you feed yourself with will become part of your map, right? It doesn't matter what it is. So your information sources and what you hear in this or that way, that's what the brain gets. We don't know what we don't know. And again, we don't care about reality or truth. We just care about mapping out reality the way we see it and how we can survive in it. So just think about it as, oh, right, okay, there's just drawing a map based on what they assume to be real. So they're doing what they're supposed to. And from an evolutionary standpoint, it's also fascinating because, as I explained before, we're supposed to believe different things. Because when it comes to the evolution of humans, since nobody knows, right? It's simply about who's the better navigator. And most likely, yeah, their beliefs were closer to reality. So over time, they will win. They will survive. So it's just that. So everybody is making their own maps, and they're supposed to trust it because evolution really does not care about individual survival. It is survival of the fittest, right? And fitness is the ability to adapt correctly to the environment. And it doesn't matter if you have bullshit information for as long as it works. And often what motivates people, like truth is not a motivator. We create all sorts of stories and narratives to motivate ourselves. So it is, again, very difficult to navigate today, and people are, again, not able to differentiate a fact from an opinion. And also, media today has changed, because it used to be, at least, they tried to convey real information, but they don't get viewers or readers if they do that anymore. So it has to be opinionated. So news has been replaced by opinions. And opinions have become facts, right? And what are people to do? So I completely understand it. And when people then subscribe to the wildest conspiracy theories, it's, again, people have done that with religion always. If you look at the religious, ideals and the stories people have related to throughout, human evolution, it's pretty crazy. So it's just that. We haven't changed much. It's just that our religions change based on human life having changed. Right? So the traditional religions do not offer that sense of, ooh, I know what's going on. Right? Because religion used to be truth. It used to be science. Right? Now we know it's not. So we use it for understanding ourselves and emotions and all of that, but we still feel genetically, I need to know what, behind the curtain, because the one who knows the truth and can define it, they're on top of the chain, like, they're on the top level of survival. So religion used to do that, because that's a lack we then just fill in, right? So conspiracy theories will give us that. So we should just relax and say, okay, they're just trying to build a map based on what's available to them and based on how they're trying to sort out what's real and not. That's what we're supposed to do. So we don't have to land on the same conclusions. We don't have to believe the same thing. Just like in evolution, nature wants as many combinations of DNA as possible to make sure that we have the right combo for someone to be the survivor. It's the same thing with how we think. So the thing is, when we have too much of people thinking the same thing, as we've had in our civilization, we all think the same, we believe the same, we believe in the same commercials, and reality is this, at some point that will break up because it's not healthy from an evolutionary point of view, right? And then people just start making shit up. But it's still a part of a natural process of diversifying a collective consciousness that's become too similar, right? So we should just look at it like from afar. So, okay, this is what's going on. It's completely natural. And no matter what someone believes, it doesn't change reality. But it can change how they relate to it. And then time will show whether it was productive for that person to draw that map or not, right? If we decide that we draw in a beautiful meadow where it's in fact like a motorway, it will not be very productive, but evolution then will correct it, right? So we can just relax. It's not like we need to convince people of anything, because this is just a game of navigation and adaptation, right? So we should get completely, and often when people feel they're onto something, right? It's just they can't stop talking about it. But okay, it's completely fine as if they feel they have discovered something. So we don't need to correct or to encourage or anything, just understand that they're just trying to build a map that makes sense to them. And often when things make sense to the individual, it's nonsense. Right? When you look at physics, it doesn't make sense to anyone, especially when you look at quantum physics. You can't use common sense to understand reality. Right? So when it makes sense, it's nonsense. It's always that. This is also why when people look at science and say, this does not make sense, so it can't be, it's like, it's got nothing to do with that. The human brain is not smart enough. This is why we need science to go beyond human bias. Right? So today we try to use common sense to make sense of it all, because as individuals we have to. That's what their brain is constantly doing. So it's utterly necessary and normal and healthy to also establish your own way of looking at the world. But then you should test it out. Right? It's just an experiment. We're all here to experiment. We're all on different paths, and therefore we need different maps. And some maps are completely wacko, but so as long as they test them out, they will figure it out. Right? We all have to walk our paths and figure things out on our own. Right? And so through our different lifetimes, we do a lot of this. Right? But I think, in general also, use it as a merit. It's like, in what way am I living in the conspiracy theory? Remember that the human culture's assumption of reality is a conspiracy theory, right? The whole how humans tell their own history is a conspiracy theory. As it's like gradually over the next few decades, more will be revealed because more will be discovered. Then we'll connect the dots and we'll see that the whole narrative is a conspiracy theory. The more we know about physics, how we assume reality is a conspiracy theory. It's basically just like connecting information and then making a narrative that we can believe in. So it's looking at this and oh, we're doing it too, right? And we should just like relax and again mirror ourselves and ask ourselves the question like, where am I doing this, right? Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Rick in the audience.
My question would be, why bothering about news? Because what I experienced, I was a TV journalist for 7 years reporting on politics, and I had this news overkill. I would read 3 newspapers every day and watch the late news and then the first news in the morning. And my pendulum, when I quit my job, swung in completely the opposite direction, so that I now don't consume any news at all. And I realized that's not the solution either, because I don't really get what's going on in the world. So my question to you would be, if it's all a narrative, and obviously the news is serving that narrative, and it's just another roadmap, it's not reality. It's a very limited view on reality, if at all. What would be, if at all, is it necessary, that would be the first question, in order to make a positive contribution, in order to resolve karma, to actually be up to date and have some kind of news consumption practice? And if so, what would be a productive, efficient, responsible way to do so?
Right. I think it's an excellent question. Especially, you know, I'll start with why we want information in the first place. Because remember that if we go back, again, to how we're hardwired to live in a small group, a small tribe, we're all specialized. What someone else does matters to us because our own survival is invested in that other person. And therefore what that person does is important. And what then developed as we develop more social dynamic is how that person thinks. Will give me clues about what that person will do when it comes to delivering on the trust, right? Because, for instance, if you have a hunter and you figure out, oh, he got drunk, he's lazy, this and that, it will affect how he will perform. And since you have invested your trust and your own life depends on it, it's important, right? News is that. It's whatever happens that we feel is relevant to our own survival. This is why we'll always have a kind of visceral response. That's when we genetically believe this is important to my survival. And this is why we have so many opinions. Because of course, if you have a hunter being lazy, you have the right to your opinion and saying, like, you can't behave like that. So it's based on that kind of contract we have together. But the challenge today is that we have so many different versions of contracts, and we have so many different understandings of what that contract is. We have so many layers of culture going on at the same time, and that makes it very difficult. So we have the need for navigational information, which is what news used to be. This is what's happening in our part of the world. This is what's happening in our country. This will affect you. So normally news was about information of things happening that will affect you some way, right? And now it's just whatever, because it's turned around. With social media, where people can then be the consumer and the customer, they can dictate what they want to see. And the moment we can decide what we want to see, we only want affirmation of belief. That's what we want to see, because then that becomes truth because I can see it right there. And that's been happening to the news. That instead of giving relevant information that can help people navigate, it's been turned around. So it's affirmation of belief. That's dangerous because people can't navigate anymore. And once they get affirmation of their own beliefs, they believe that to be the absolute truth, which is, of course, part of the tribalization. So what the fuck are we to do? We can't trust anything. Spiritually, I always say that trust is something we have to grow out of very quickly because it's a disease. It's primitive. And it means that you're outsourcing the responsibility for your own journey. Waking up means the opposite. You're pulling back everything you've outsourced, all responsibility you've laid on other people. And you're growing to having the full, complete responsibility and creative freedom to express and travel your own journey. That takes time because we're so used to now outsourcing absolutely everything. This is why we feel we have to trust everyone, and everyone keeps breaking our trust. Because living in this civilization means that we are so specialized that everything else, right? Just think of a modern life. You can't do anything on your own, like nothing. Food, clothes, home, like none of it. Information, like there are very few things you do on your own. This is why now it's so popular again with cooking, pretending that we're like doing it ourselves, and like different hobbies, because we need to tell ourselves that I'm in charge of my own journey. Look, I'm cooking. Yeah, you didn't grow it. You didn't process it. You just went to the store and paid with a credit card, and now you're just assembling it, pretending that I'm capable, right? It's that, because we're not capable anymore. So the process of waking up means becoming more and more responsible. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything on your own, but you have to understand yourself and life and the relationship. And then starting to pull back and recognizing how much you are blaming the world, how much you have entrusted the world, and pull that back and say, well, nah, I'm responsible. I'm the creator. That takes decades of hard work for any human to fully get to. It's not, oh yeah, everything is better, I get it. No, you don't. It takes decades of dedicated work because the ego will not accept it. But that's where we need to go first. And then we need to raise our consciousness. We can do that at the same time. But again, understanding what is my journey? Why have I incarnated? What am I here to achieve? Because it's only when we connect with what we are here to study, what our true journey is, that we begin taking full responsibility. And this is the opportunity that we have now, because the news is just bullshit. Like everything you're being fed is just like lies and bullshit and narratives. So you can't navigate based on that. You can try, but it will make you confused and unhappy. And you can't disconnect from it either. Because when you have the disconnection, but you have still entrusted the world, you're still not capable. You're less capable, right? So you need to go into that process of slowly pulling back, from the mirrors, each responsibility that you've outsourced. Every time you recognize it again and again and again and again. And then learn for each time, how do I do it? How do I become the creator in my own life? How do I fully take the wheel? How do I become the full creator of my own existence? And it's a long process of awakening. But it's that. But to me, what's happening now in the world means that some people will drown, right? Because they get lost in all of this. But if you have a spark of awakening, realizing I can't trust the world is the best thought ever. If we don't blame, but see it as inspiration to say, oh, right, it's me. I have to navigate, which means I have to become competent, I have to become alive, I have to become awake. And I need to connect, I need to raise my consciousness, I need to become whole, I need to take care of myself, I need to fully take the wheel in my own life. That's a healthy path. And I think more and more people are getting there. It's difficult though, because we have to move through all of this bullshit in ourselves and our own psychology and how this civilization operates. But we need to learn also to receive navigational information from the inside. Because as spirit, as soul, we're already in that higher position. You already know why you're here. You already know what you're here to accomplish and how to do it. And we need to learn to listen less to the world around us and more to the inner channel. But that itself also takes several years of hard work. Because in the beginning, it will just be trash. Because you've been used to feeding it from here, right? Which means your brain is pretty much fucked. So your information channel is already, completely messed up. And purifying it means spiritual practices, it means discipline, it means living it out and see what happens. And gradually over years, you'll be able to cleanse it out and the signals will get through. And this is where we are as humans. We will not be able to navigate the future of our own existence as a life form unless we begin to connect. Because we've come to the end of our own narrative. Again, it worked 100 years ago, but now we can start seeing how harmful it is. And it falls apart because it's all bullshit, it's all make-believe. And it's only when we connect and we do that work and we purify ourselves, that's when truth will start flowing through. It will not be conspiracy, like we will be beyond that. It will simply, the flow, we will simply know. We will get information and signals that will instruct us very clearly, and we will be able to navigate and understand why we need to do certain things at a certain time. And we will understand others. We can observe their journeys. We can start connecting to what the human experience is truly about and why we're here, and also the great healing work that lies ahead of us. So that's really my answer. It's like going from the information from the outside to having the discipline to connect and train your own channel, because everything is already there. And this will be a great shift in how humans operate, but this will take several centuries.
Trump is not the only sort of mirror of that black and white, more simplified way of thinking, authoritarian kind of perspective. And yet there's also this tendency across the world that liberal parties like the Democratic Party in the United States struggle to basically front candidates who trigger people to support them the same way that people support these other types of mirrors. And so Katrina online asks, why is it that liberal thinking, sort of more forward-thinking parties are struggling so much to front candidates that trigger that kind of support?
Oh, very simple. Now, when we experience too much complexity, as I said, what do we want? We need the binary perspective. Often the liberals, they want to include more. Like when you look at like the whole woke thing that I often have a lot of fun with. It's that trying to include everyone, everyone's the same, blah, blah, blah. And we pretend that's the case. We're not, we're in different journeys. We have different vibration, we have different culture, we have different everything, right? It's pretending that's not there and saying that, yes, we just need to deal with even more complexity because that's the solution. When people feel that, no, this is too much already. I need to recognize myself. I need to recognize who I am, and you tell me that we're all of this. And this is why. When you try to be everything to everyone, right, you end up being nothing to no one, right? So it's that. And they don't seem to understand in many ways, how people feel. Right? Some people may embrace the inclusion of everything, and this is where we are going slowly, right? But we need to also recognize that most people are not ready for that. They are afraid. They feel they're losing their identity, and then being told that there is something wrong with you. You're a bigot, you're racist, this or that. When they're simply trying to, no, I am me, I want my life. I want a life I can recognize. And then you're told that there's something wrong with you. It's not a good look, right? So this is often the communication problem from the more liberal side, is that it becomes too much to deal with, and it feels forced to people who just want to have their own life. Again, different perspectives. There's no right or wrong, but the question is why they're not able to get their point across and get support. It is mainly because of this. People want to connect with their own life and their own identity. They don't want it to be taken away from them. And I think at this point, it's really that simple. So we are in a wave where people want more of what they can recognize. And that is, again, the deglobalization movement and how people then diversify in the way that instead of everything being multi-layered, they will split into different bubbles because they just want to feel, I want to be with my own people. I want to be with like-minded individuals. We are genetically hardwired to do so for the time being. So it's really part of that landscape. And I understand it's very difficult to navigate also for leaders, right? Because you can say, well, we have a diverse country. How do we do it? So nobody's got the answer for that because it's part of the karma, right? It's part of what we need to cleanse out because I've said very clearly for decades that we are moving towards one planet and one people. We will get there, but the road, and that journey is extremely bumpy and will be filled with conflicts on all levels. Because we need to work out our differences, and we will, but again, it will take centuries. Anyone else?
We had one last question of all of this technology, information, like we're clearly in a massive state of overwhelm. Nobody knows how to navigate. And one of our listeners online asks, if all of this that's kind of unfolding is so damaging and detrimental, why is it in a way being supported / allowed by the spiritual and other stewards of the planet and this big experiment that's happening with humans?
Right. You cannot heal a level of consciousness. It can only encourage the growth and healing. It's the same thing when you have a child having a tantrum. You can't heal it. You know that you'll get through it. It's part of growing up. But yeah, its tantrum is part of having more hormones being released into the brain, creating more of a sense of I, inflating the ego, and now the child is just experimenting with the power to say no. Completely natural. I'll just sit here and wait. Life goes on. You can't heal it. You will not be able to change it. So when someone has a certain karma, a certain resistance, and a certain consciousness, a point of evolution, the next step is what it is. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's what healing is. It's working out the distance between what you believe and what is. That is never easy. And it's a lot of yelling, a lot of tantrums, a lot of aggression, a lot of everything, because the ego doesn't want it. And yet we heal. Spiritual growth is basically healing. Less resistance to what is. So whatever we need to go through as a planet, that's completely okay. What we try to do is just like when you have a child in that phase where a lot of tantrums, you just try to child-proof the home a little bit more, right? So the child can go through a necessary part of their development without injuring themselves too much. But a little bit of injury is also necessary. If you overprotect, they learn nothing. Then the child will become self-centered and will try to rule the world by saying no and being obnoxious. So it's important that the child also experiences the world saying no, experiences the consequences of their behavior. The point is to encourage growth, encourage intelligence, encourage a positive development. So everything is under management. And it's never about avoiding manifestations. It's about making the manifestations as efficient karmically as possible. Right? So when we look at everything happening, we say, that's not a problem. It's a solution. It's about looking at the most kind of, again, efficient way through this phase. And tantrums are a natural part of the development. Going through this phase is a natural part of a life form becoming more connected and raising the consciousness. Then you have to go through all of this because the individual ego is being challenged. And this life form's disconnect to reality and to nature is being challenged. And that's very painful for humans. But then stopping things from happening will not help. That does not heal consciousness. It's only by going through it, by experiencing the full scope and the full extent of one's resistance. That's how we heal. That's how we get to the point of saying, oh, this is not working. Maybe we should do it differently. This is also what's happening with the environment, right? It's just when we start seeing the consequences, then humans are willing to change, not before. So the point is to let humans go as far as necessary, but trying to avoid complete destruction. Just like a child could harm, themselves terribly. You just try as an adult to, guide a little bit, but at the same time know that it's necessary. So we let humans go through what they need, but at the same time try to avoid the worst pathways. And it's working. When you look at what we need to go through as individuals in order to grow, look at the planet, it's the same thing. So this is a wonderful time to be a human. There's never been more growth and more healing, more awakening. And that's what we need to look at. The rest is simply what is necessary in order to achieve that. So don't be fearful when it comes to everything that's happening. It's only about expansion of consciousness and healing and growth and love. And that will be the result. It will just, again, take a few centuries. As I said, we have chosen, all of us, to incarnate now, which means that you need it too. Don't avoid it. Understand it. Be part of it. Use the mirrors. Use the opportunities to lift. Try to then go from the outer chaos and find connection inside. Find a more intelligent way to navigate through life. You will only find truth within. The outer world can never guide you. So use what's happening in the world to connect within, to do the work, to become a vehicle. And then you will do it from love, because you will see that everything is necessary and everything is absolutely perfect the way it is. But you can then be the adult in the room and encourage the healing, encourage the learning, without judgment, without wanting it to be different, but being a presence that vibrates the next level. You can only do that when you have walked that path yourself. This is why if we want to be of service, we have to do the work ourselves. We can never lead anyone farther along the way than we've come ourselves. We need to do the work, we need to be disciplined. Otherwise, we will just be another group of people with opinions. Right? So be inspired. See the growth. See the awakening and unfoldment and everything floating through the surface so we can work out more stuff. And that's the beauty of the planet right now. That's the beauty of everything happening. And that's the wonderful, wonderful beauty of the individual named Trump.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us tonight, both here in our studio audience and online. This has been IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only program in the world that really gives you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. And I hope you've experienced that tonight, that we've really unpacked this phenomenon of Trump and learned a lot more about the principles deep in there that are unfolding and how we all can learn and grow through it. So be sure to join us next week, next Monday, 7 p.m., 19 o'clock Oslo time. We'll be back with IKYA Live, both here at IKYA Center and online. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, IKYA.official, down below. Like the video. Also send it on to any fellow spiritual seekers who might benefit from tonight's episode. They can watch it. It'll be posted at our channel. And follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at IKYA.official. And be sure, finally, to check out IKYA.org. If you want to study directly with IKYA and get this kind of fantastic teaching and mirroring on a more regular basis, our next upcoming course, IKYA Mantra Collection 5, where we work with unique, never-before-heard mantra directly from IKYA as a spiritual master, then you've got to check it out, IKYA.org. It starts already on the 10th of October. So again, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week for IKYA Live.